I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop so I can come down to you? These are the words of Nehemiah as he built the walls fortifying Jerusalem over 2,000 years ago, as told in the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. Today we see, just as it was back then, that Jerusalem is the source of heavy conflict in the Middle East, with multiple groups of people vying for control over the ancient city, and global powers weighing in on the conflicts that have been brewing over centuries. Join us as we delve into the mystifying history of Jerusalem and Israel, exploring the ongoing struggles and complexities that have shaped this ancient area for over 2,000 years. Through riveting discussions, we unravel the mysteries surrounding Israel's pivotal role in global affairs, its significance in the Abrahamic faiths, and the intricate web of U.S. foreign policy in the broader Middle East. Get ready to expand your understanding of one of the most misunderstood regions on Earth, here on the Great Work Podcast. All right, welcome to the Great Work Podcast. This is Melinda Strauss from Tik Tok. I'm sure all of you know who she is. Thank you for coming on.
It's an honor to be here, Amanda. I think everything you post is amazing. You know, I reach out to you all the time about it, and just I'm such a supporter of what you do. And I know that so many other Jewish people really feel supported by watching your videos as well.
Thank you. That's so sweet. It's kind of funny how it started. I saw a tweet on probably 2 a.m., October 7th, our time. And someone said, like, it was like a joking tweet. It was like, liberal white girls, make sure you turn off Twitter now because you're not going to like to see what Israel's about to do in response to the attacks. And I was like, oh God, we all know what's coming, right? Like, the attack's been going on for 3 hours at this point, and people are already concerned about, like, we already knew that the protests were coming. And I've been shocked with how bad they are.
Yeah.
But this happens every time, right?
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised at all.
Yeah.
You know, as a Jewish person, I've been religious my whole life, but on social media, I've been sharing about Judaism on TikTok specifically for over 3 years now. And gosh, is it almost 4? Could it be almost 4 years? I'm gonna have to go look. Whatever. I'm like speechless even thinking about that. And longer than that, I've been sharing as a blogger since 2011. So I've always seen the anti-Semitism. I used to think, oh, it's not so bad. But then I realized it was just because I had such a small following. The more you grow, the worse the hate gets. And it's gotten so bad. But back in 2000, there were, my niece was actually in Israel when there were rockets that were being fired in from Hamas and all of that. And I saw it then too. It wasn't this bad, but my niece was there and she spent a lot of time in bunkers. It was during, COVID time. And I experienced a lot of it then. This is just so much worse, but also what's happening is so much worse. So the response, it like equals in their way, in their hypocrisy, the response like levels up to what's actually happening in the Middle East. It brings me back even further in 2020 when we watched everything going on with COVID and with the elections and everything that was happening, that people just, they fight for things they don't really understand and they fight hard. My family's from Seattle, and watching everything that was happening in Seattle during that time, this isn't surprising. It's the same people.
That's the biggest thing. It's the same people, and none of them know what they're talking about. And they use these words that they don't know what they mean. And so for me, it's like, okay, I can tell you what apartheid means, because if you want to have a conversation about apartheid, fine, but you're not even using it correctly. So we need to like make sure we even know the definition. And it's like, it's so hard on social media. One of the first like questions I wanted to ask you is like anti-Semitism in general, especially in your comments. The most annoying comments that I see on your page, because I watch all of your videos. I love, my favorite videos you make are the what you make for Shabbos each week. And when I scroll through your page on that, when I scroll through your page for your what you make for Shabbos, there are a bunch of comments that are just like free Palestine.
Yeah.
And it's
always.
Like, that's like, you live in America. What you're making for your family for Shabbos has nothing to do with what's going on over there. To me, that's one of the reasons, like, that's one of the most annoying things of anti-Semitism I see as a non-Jew, is just like you have anything to do with what's going on in Gaza right now. You know what I mean?
I would say that every Jewish creator does get that. right?
Yeah.
They get the free Palestines, and more than ever, but even before, it was always like, here we go with the Holocaust jokes, because the amount of screenshots I have on my phone of people making Holocaust jokes, and the 6 million wasn't enough, and like Hitler was right, and all these things that they say that have not, it's not even just about Israel, it's about Jews in general. They use Israel as that a Jewish person, or any person who believes that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination in the land of Israel. Nothing political, nothing more, nothing less. That is really what Zionism at its core is. And most Jews in the world are that. And I would say political Zionism is like a whole nother thing. And unfortunately, they make everything about political Zionism instead of what it really is. But they just use that as an excuse for all of their hate. So again, the Holocaust jokes, like, where does that come from? Right? All of these different things that they do, it's just an excuse. A lot of them will say, I was just playing around, I'm just making a joke. I'm like, it's not funny, right?
No.
Because I'm openly a supporter of Israel. I won't even say to people like, why are you coming after me? I'm a Jew. Like, they know I'm so open about my support of Israel that, okay, if you come to my videos and you say free Palestine on my What I Made for Shabbos video, I don't even block or deal with these people. I just leave them alone, because they're just wasting their time and they're boosting my algorithm. So hey, cool. Which, like, still, even on a video where I said that I'm making donations based on my video views to Israel, I'm making donations, that they're still commenting. I'm like, are you listening? But it doesn't surprise me when they do it. It's just kind of par for the course. It's one of the things that I know TikTok and this is all social media. It's not just a TikTok thing. It's Instagram, it's YouTube, it's all of them. When people come after TikTok specifically, and I'm like, like, you should get off of TikTok because they're anti-Semitic. I'm like, all of these apps don't protect Jewish people. And I've heard from Muslims that these apps don't protect them either. I don't think that it's a Jewish thing. I think it's a religion thing that religious people, I know a lot of Christians will complain about it as well, that they don't feel protected from the hate that happens on social media. And it happens a lot. I have a lot of friends who are Christian through TikTok who deal constantly with people who are just hating on them for their religion. Like, it's a big issue. Hopefully it gets taken care of at some point, or it won't. But we will keep sharing no matter what, because we're not going to let that stop us from, like, being able to share the beauty of religion in all the different ways that we do.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing the hate, the different types of hate for different religions, because for me, what I see I'm Christian, I talk about being Christian, and what I will normally see is people saying like, well, you're violating what your Bible says and blah, blah, blah. And it's always from people like, I don't know where, I feel like the biggest lie comes from this thing like Christians aren't allowed to judge. The New Testament says to judge. Like, if people don't act in accordance with the church and they belong to the church, we are supposed to tell them to stop. And if they don't stop, we're supposed to distance ourselves from them.
Right.
That's what the Bible teaches. But for Jews, it's completely different. It's just like, I feel like they don't ever invoke the Old Testament or the Torah or any Jewish law when they're commenting on your stuff. It's just like, well, you're a Jew. And that's so gross to me.
Yeah. Well, there are people who definitely nowadays have been saying, well, the Torah says you're not supposed to kill people and you're not supposed to, like, support that, right? Because their version of what's happening in the Middle East right now is so convoluted that this isn't what the Torah teaches. I'm like, oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing with me. And they'll come up with, a lot of times they actually will say things from the New Testament where I'm like, I'm a Jewish person. We don't even follow the New Testament.
Right.
But those I especially ignore, because I just feel like people who are quoting the Torah in those ways have no idea what they're talking about. I was just having this conversation with a Christian friend of mine who has been, like, really getting in depth into the Old Testament, the New Testament. And I was saying to her that, like, when we as Jewish people study the Torah, the Tanakh, we don't just take it at face value. We don't just read the words and save quotes and put them on our walls. And I have quotes everywhere from all different kinds of things. But with the Torah, everything has interpretation. There's like 500 rabbis who interpret every word of the Torah, because we believe that every word has a purpose. And every letter has a purpose. When a letter is backwards or forwards or off in one way, there's a reason for it. And then we spend months and months and years trying to figure out why that is. So we don't ever just read the Torah at face value, which is why we also never quote the Torah at face value.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a weird, it's a weird thing because I guess the point I keep seeing, so Jess, who I had on my podcast a few weeks ago, is British and Jewish, and I wish I had not stopped recording, but she was saying, like, it's just so crazy because I'm not a religious person, but I'm visibly Jewish. And she felt an instance where she was targeted in her place of work with someone coming in, staring at her, saying, like, is this person here just because she works in a more Muslim area, I guess? And obviously I'm not saying that all Muslims are doing this, but she she feels scared being visibly Jewish, having Hebrew tattooed on her wrist, wearing a Star of David. She tucks it in her shirt, but she still feels like it's not going to save me. And she's not, like, that part I think is the hardest part for Christians to understand, because they come at us trying almost, I don't know, I guess we could like hide being Christian. It's not an ethnicity at the end of the day. And even if Jewish people are not religious, they still get the same hate. And it's like really scary to me. And I really commend you for making the videos that you do, because I think it gives power to other people who are scared to see you be like open and proudly Jewish.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I share so much and so often, because I share I used to share like 8 videos a day, and now it's down to more like 3 to 4 a day. And even then I have more that I want to share, but like the algorithm's just being a pain. So I save them and do a little bit at a time. But I share so much because I have a rule that if I'm thinking something, other people are thinking it too. And a lot of times people are thinking things alone. And they just think that I'm the only one who thinks it. I'm so frustrated. Why does nobody else think the way that I do? So I share. Well, I share for myself because it's so nice to get it all off my chest. But I share because I want other people to know that how they feel is how other people feel too, especially in the Jewish world, where it's like you said, like people who are not religious, people are religious. If you're Jewish and you even a little bit look Jewish, then there's a possibility of things happening. And we don't live our life in fear. We really try not to. It makes me sad when someone feels that they have to hide the star. But I also, or I'm wearing like the map of Israel. I get why someone would not when they're surrounded by anyone who they think might see it and come after them for it. And it's the reason that I say anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because they're not being separated. And I do think that there are people who are anti-Israeli government, a lot of people who think they're anti-Zionist because they're being told what Zionism means, but it's not what it actually means. There are people who are anti-government, but can still believe in the state of Israel, can still believe the Jewish people can have a homeland. They can still believe in peace. They can still believe in a 2-state solution if that's ever a possibility. That Israel wants it. The Jewish people want it. Let's get both sides to want it at the same time. But if you're saying you're anti-Zionist, but then you're coming after Jews who are living in New York, who are living anywhere outside of Israel, and also considering that there are Muslims and Christians who live in Israel. There's like, what, 2 million Muslims that live in Israel that are citizens, that are, they're part of the Knesset. They volunteer in the IDF. What about them? They're Zionists too.
Right.
It's like they're just forgotten, which is why it's just all anti-Semitism. And people have a hard time hearing that because, they don't want to be told that they're full of hate, but it's what they are. And it's a crappy thing to hear the truth about yourself, but it's also the truth. And I'll never stop saying it, even if it makes people feel offended.
Well, and like when you look at the history, anti-Semitism, that word comes from basically, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there was a rise in anti-Jewishness, and it sounded bad to say, well, we're against Jews. So they said, well, we're anti-Semitic, and it's different. And now we see the same thing, where it's like, well, we're not against Jews, we're against Zionists. And it's like, same thing. And
that's what the Hamas Charter did, right? The Hamas Charter changed, because, they love to change things all the time. They change history as well, but they literally changed their charter and turned the original charter, which says Jew everywhere, into Zionist. How do people fall for it? Like, it's one of the things I think at the core of what drives most of us crazy is the way that they're just believing everything they're being told. There's no words. And yet everything that happens with Israel or the Jewish people demanding proof. I need to see all the proof. I'm demanding proof from you every day. You tell me where you have this information. I'm like, and yet Hamas or the Ministry of Health, whatever, puts together numbers and we wish nobody was dying. I don't want anybody dying in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Israel. No one. This is war and it sucks. but the numbers coming out, like 500 people in a hospital explosion that never actually was a hospital explosion, but 500 people, you knew that within minutes of the
Right.
explosion.
Well,
Make
and
it make sense.
Human Rights Watch came out finally and said, no, that was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. But that's the annoying thing. And I feel like this happens every single war. Over the first week, the reporters forget that they're dealing with terrorist organizations. And
Yeah.
so they start to report whatever the terrorist organizations say are true. And they always say it at night during US prime time. And then the next day when it's light out, they realize, oh, the hospital's still standing. I guess Israel didn't bomb the hospital. And then they walk it back slowly and they don't really fully walk it back. And then
Yeah.
people have already disseminated this propaganda and these lies to millions of people. And people are still in my comments saying, well, then why did Israel bomb the hospital? Well,
Yeah. All the time. All the
they
time.
didn't. Israel has not bombed one single hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They could once they evacuate them, but they haven't yet. So
And yet Hamas has actually sent rockets and hit hospitals in Israel, but nobody cares about that,
nobody
which is
cares.
why we know it's like so clear when you see people. This is something that hit me a while ago, because people are constantly in every video saying, what about, right? The what about isms. Like, how can you be talking about the hostages being returned when all these people in Gaza are being killed? All the what abouts, right? Like, you can have both at the same time. You could feel two things. But what I've realized is that I can feel two things, but they won't. So when they say, what about them? What they really mean is, I don't care about Jews. They want me to care about both sides, but they refuse to care about both sides. So I've stopped apologizing. I do care about both sides, and I'm not going to say it in every video because they want me to. They want every video to just be like, and I'm not a news source. You are a news source. You're an amazing news source. You explain things so well. Every time I see your videos, I'm like, great, I'm going to learn something new today.
Well, thank you.
I don't do that. I do share things that are happening, but I'm not a news source and I don't want to be.
And I even feel weird saying that I'm a news source, because there was one day that I tried to really cover things as it was happening, and it's an active war zone, and I got some things wrong, and I think I could have at first. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to explain. When I get a comment, I'm just going to explain. But then the problem is when I reply to comments, I get reported for harassment and bullying.
Yeah. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's so fun.
But you do share, even if you're waiting and taking, you're doing what I think is the right thing. You're not just coming out and saying, this just happened. You're waiting until the information is available, and then you're explaining and you're sharing. The people who want to learn are going to learn, and the people who have already made up their minds, who no matter how many times you read an article saying that the hospital was not actually in an explosion, and it was the parking lot, or that it was jihad or whatever it is, they don't care because they've already decided what they want to decide. So you're not speaking to those people. I'm not speaking to those people. We're speaking to the people who do want to learn. And there's a lot of people. They're quiet, but they're learning and they're listening. And they are a majority, right? Bullies are always the smallest group, but the loudest, because they just need to feel important and heard and like they're doing something. And that's what these protesters are. When you're going to a synagogue in from where I'm from Washington State, from one of the oldest synagogues in the area, Herzl, and you are destroying it and writing Free Gaza and all these things on a synagogue in Washington State, you are doing nothing to help anyone. You are doing nothing to free Palestinians. And when I said, I made a video, actually, I made a video making cookies, right, to raise money for something in Israel. Not even thinking twice about how anybody could ever have a problem with that.
Right.
And the comments on that video, the anger and the anger from people, why am I sending my money to Israel and not Gaza? Like, first of all, any money that goes into Gaza, you've seen it at this point. Hamas just takes it all. Billions and billions of dollars. Their leaders are worth billions each, and yet there's no help coming to the people. I want those people free. I want Hamas gone so that they can be free, because Gaza used to be beautiful. When Israel pulled out, it was beautiful. And there's still beaches and things, but they're just not treated right. Why does Gaza not have bomb shelters? People get mad at me. I remember in 2021 when I shared my niece in a shelter, in a bomb shelter, and the comments were, well, they don't have those in Gaza. And my response was, but they should. And yet their leadership refuses to protect their people, where Israel takes their time and money and puts it into these shelters. My parents have an apartment in Israel. Every apartment has one room. that is the bomb shelter. Everywhere you go. Actually, I was just talking about it with friends that like, I don't even know if I'm just walking around Jerusalem, like where to go. I'm like, I would just walk into the nearest store and be like, where's your shelter? But that's something that should be in Gaza and the West Bank. That's not on Israel to build bomb shelters when Gaza and the West Bank have leadership, very clear leadership.
Also, Gaza wouldn't need bomb shelters if they did not bomb Israel first.
That's true. That's true.
That's the other thing. Yeah. It's almost like, it's not funny, but it's almost funny to me how the people, like the Hamas, it's just like, it's like they need air, they need water, they need food, and they need to launch these bombs. And they know most of them won't hit targets. They know 30% of them are going to hit in Gaza, but they're still going to launch these bombs. It's not funny, but I have a follower who's in Israel right now, and it was in the first week of the war, and someone was like, well, they're running out of fuel and food. And I was like, but they haven't stopped launching rockets. And the follower was like, they're never going to run out of rockets.
No.
It's not funny, but it's kind of like their priorities are so clear. I don't understand why people can't see that, or they just choose not to, I guess.
I could tell you why, because I have a theory on it. I think it's not just my theory, but it's, people love a victim, right? Especially in the United States. Like, we are obsessed with victimhood, and not just on a global scale, but individually. Everybody wants to blame somebody else, because if you can blame somebody else, then there's no responsibility on yourself. There's no accountability. It's a big thing right now. Everything is about blame, right? The only reason that Hamas does the things they do is because 75 years of oppression. Right? They talk about the Nakba, which interestingly enough is not even like, yes, what happened. It wasn't called the Nakba back then, right? That's a newer name. But what happened truly happened. The reason it happened is because their leadership, with, 5 different countries attacked Israel at the same time because they didn't like this 2-state solution. It was like, okay, well, you guys can have it. Oh, no, wait, we're just kidding. We're going to take it from you. And just like every other time in history, with a tiny army, because in the sense of how much is there, even though we have a very strong army now, but we win. The Jewish people continue to thrive and win. Every story in history has been just like this. Now, when you don't learn history, you don't learn how to learn from history. Right. So they just keep on attacking. Like, what other countries in the world, and actually, if you know, because I don't have the answer to this, are there any other countries in the world where one side lost the war and just continues to attack because they still want their land back?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there's rebel groups, but they're not as well funded as these groups. I don't know. I mean, and then even if you look at like other historically oppressed, I would argue the Kurds in Turkey and Iraq are way more oppressed than the Palestinians are.
There's a lot of people out there. I mean, we look at what's happening. I'm going to just talk about it, and we'll see if we can share this later. Like what's happening in China with the Uyghur Muslims. And I actually one time tried making a video about it and it was muted, which was really, really frustrating because people ask, why don't you talk about things? I'm like, because it gets muted. But nobody is shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge for Uyghur Muslims in China.
And there's millions.
Yeah, like that. There's an actual Holocaust happening, and nobody cares. People care, but not the people shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge for Palestine. And there's a million different lists of all of them, but that to me always sticks out because you're fighting for Muslims. There's Muslims who are having like an actual Holocaust happening and they don't care. And to say, oh, they don't know, there's no excuse. These are adults. Like, I hold adults accountable. I've been through times where I've felt like maybe they just don't know. It's what they're told. Well, they're taught Zionism means this, even though it's not what it means. These are adults. Like, if you get your information from a phone, go do your research afterwards. Anything you learn from Amanda, anything you learn from me, anything my father shares, go online and look it up afterwards. Don't take when Gigi Hadid shares something, please don't take it at its word. She even admitted recently, like, oh, I just didn't do my research. Like, then why did you share it? Why do you share a blood libel without doing research first to make sure that Jewish people and Israelis are not skinning people or taking their organs?
I know it's
frustrating to say the least. It all is very frustrating. And it's why when I share, I know who I'm sharing for. I know the comments that are coming my way. I ignore them. I block them if I have the opportunity to, because some people just like harass over and over and over again. I don't need stalkers in my life. Only the good kind of stalkers, not the bad ones, you know?
Mhm.
But it's knowing who you're talking to and not letting the people who are trying to bully you stop you
Yeah.
from continuing. Because most of the time, these bullies, they just want to feel special. They want to feel big. So they put people down to make themselves feel bigger.
That must be what it is.
Yeah.
So I have two other ways I want to go with this, but you just brought up your dad. So I want to talk about your family's history, because I know that you have some interesting family history, which kind of goes against the narrative that
Yeah.
everything was so peaceful and calm during the Ottoman Empire. I always like to bring up, the genocides of the Assyrians, Greeks, and Armenians that happened under the Ottoman Empire. But also, your family lived in the Palestinian Mandate. I believe your grandma was born there, and they
Yeah,
had
my
to
soft.
flee. Yeah, they had to flee, right?
They did. So it's actually interesting. My family came to, and I only learned about this fairly recently. One of my cousins wrote a really great article about it. I think I sent it to you, right? About when my family came to British Mandate Palestine. And they came in the early 1900s and they helped build a community. And that community ended up literally being burned to the ground. And they've had to flee, and they fled to Tel Aviv. Well, they came in through Old Jaffa. That whole area, like sometimes I even get confused by the geography of it, but they ended up rebuilding a little farther out where it was safer. Because really, before, Tel Aviv was sand.
Yeah.
Nobody was living there. People who were like, well, they took the land. Nobody took anything. Nobody was living in Tel Aviv. So my family helped with building the communities in Tel Aviv. And my grandmother and her brother were both born in British Mandate Palestine. My Safta was born in 19, and her father actually went to California before. He went when my great grandmother was pregnant, because what did he do? He went to build a life there and be able to make enough money to bring them along. And I believe, I don't remember when he went. I guess he must have gone to like 1923 or somewhere in that range. And he was able a few years later to send tickets for a boat going to California, and they left. So my grandmother, I believe, was 4 years old when they fled, because there was so much there were uprisings and there was so much danger there, and they weren't safe. Their community was burned to the ground, and then it was burned to the ground again. So it's like it kept happening. And yet people pretend like everything was so peaceful. And I'm like, where are you getting your information from? The Arabs and the Jews did not live peacefully. And when people say, well, Palestine let in the Jews during the Holocaust, not only was it a massive fight, because they at one point were not letting them in, but to say it was Palestinians, it doesn't make any sense. It was people who lived in Palestine, British Mandate Palestine. But British Mandate Palestine wasn't Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
It was everybody who lived there. The soccer team had the Star of David on it.
Yeah.
The coin had Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't the Palestine that people think of when they think, oh, Palestine, like this argument that I've been Palestine. Oh, Jesus was Palestinian. Like, because he was born in Bethlehem, in Beis Lechem, which if you look at a map today, I believe, where is it? The West Bank? Like, what area is it in? But he was born in Judea. Like, people have trouble thinking past the 19 history wise. And there's so much that happened before then. And they just refuse to believe any of it's true. Anything before 1948 never happened. It's all just a made up thing.
It's kind of weird because it's so selective with the history. Yes, modern day Bethlehem is a modern day city in the West Bank. Yes. But the religious sites where Jesus was born, they built churches on top of them now, but they're all there. Just like how the religious sites where Jesus was crucified are in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Just
I went. Did I tell you? You know
No.
that?
No.
I went. I was there this summer, and I've never in my life, like, I've been learning a lot more about Christian history because of TikTok. The same way I teach Jewish history in my Jewish life, I love learning about other religions. And I learned a lot about Muslim history also, and how all that got started. And when I was in Israel, I went on this trip, and I went with two Christian influencers.
Oh, cool.
So we did the walk. Oh, what is it called?
Okay, yeah.
The church, the Holy Sepulchre.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, I can't believe I remember that. I impressed myself. Where Jesus was crucified and buried. And it was intense. I mean, like, to see the people who were coming, like, I wasn't going there to pray, and I usually don't go to churches, but I felt very strongly that for the sake of history and knowledge and understanding, I wanted to be there. It was definitely intense, like with everybody who's, praying where he was crucified and everything. But sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to share with you that I went and it was like,
no, it's cool. I mean, when I was in Israel, it was a political trip. So I went to the Western Wall and we prayed there. All of us. We had Muslims on my trip, Jews on my trip, Christians on my trip. We all prayed there. We weren't allowed to go up onto Al-Aqsa because it was right after the Obama administration abstained from that UN resolution. So they were worried that on our trip there was going to be, we went like maybe 4 days after that happened. So they were worried there might be violence that would break out over something that would have benefited the Palestinians, but no one talks about that. And so we didn't get to go up there. And then we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So I didn't get to spend that much time there. And it's weird as a Christian going there because I grew up Protestant. And then after visiting there, I want to convert to Catholicism and I put it off. But it's weird because it's a Greek Orthodox church. So being in the site of like Jesus, which is obviously every Christian's like savior, it feels like unrecognizable to me because it's all Greek Orthodox iconography, which just doesn't like, it's kind of a weird thing and it's cool to see, but it was like interesting. And then also when you hear about that point, you think it's like going to be a hill, like a hillside, because that's where it happened. And no, they built a church on top of it. So it's kind of interesting. But the point I was like with all of this is like yes, Bethlehem, those historical sites exist, just like they exist in Jerusalem, just like the Temple Mount, which is the holiest site in Judaism, which is there. Like when we were there, they drove us past a cemetery. They said that's the oldest cemetery in the world. It's a Jewish cemetery. So the Jews were there. So you recognize that Jesus was in Bethlehem, and that is in modern day Palestine, but you won't recognize the Jewish historical sites, which do give Jews a tie to the land. The city of David, that's a big significant place to you. That was super, like my favorite thing. One of my favorite things we did on the trip. That's there. Masada's there. All of these historical sites, but they only want to point to the one that they think proves their point and doesn't. And I just think it's so weird.
Have you seen that image? There's an image that has gone around with Al-Aqsa, with the mosque, and it shows there's like lines around it, and it shows like the year that it was built, and then the year that it was built on top of the temple. So like you keep wanting to say, oh, I was here first, which none of that really matters anyways. But that's the argument they want to continue making. And yet you built a mosque on top, which is their third holiest site, on top of our holiest site. And we're not even allowed to go there. It's to me, it's always crazy. Like we walked by it on that trip I was on, and like you could hear people praying, and just like there's a pull. You want to be there as a Jewish person. And mind you, I actually feel very strongly that for right now, like it's not where we need to be right now. We don't have a temple. And until the Messiah comes in Judaism, the way we believe is until there's a Messiah, there's no third holy temple. So there is, maybe that's the reason it's there. Like I always try and think of like the purposes and everything, but there is something so frustrating when you see it and you go, that's our holiest site and your third holiest site. And yet we are not allowed to go near there. There was one opportunity I had many years ago to possibly go. And they basically said, you have to take off anything Jewish related, like basically any star. And I was like, if that's what you're telling me I'm allowed to go there, I'm not going there. I refuse. Like I would not to have to hide being Jewish in order to go. I'd rather not go until it's time. I'll go when the temple is built and it'll be amazing and the Messiah will come and it'll be incredible. But until then, I just felt like for me to have to go but hide who I am in order to be there, in order to be safe, to have like a whole team around you to keep you safe, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So things like that, you just kind of put your hands up for. But yeah, it's that the history's there. Every step you take in Jerusalem, if you dig down, every like parking lot, when you dig right across from Ir-David, the city of David, they were like, oh, we're going to dig, right? There's a parking lot. Let's dig. They ended up finding layers and layers, the Romans, the Greeks, like all these different layers of history. They're still digging. They found the pool that everyone, including Jesus, dipped into before walking up to the temple during the holidays. I've done the walk. It's such like it's so powerful when you would walk up it from, you would go in the pool and then you would walk up to the Holy Temple, and it just like there would be shops along the way, and they have all of it dug up where they have ashes from when everything was burned, because ashes they don't disintegrate, they stay there. And it's so powerful, but all that history, it's like nothing to them.
Well, the only history that matters is the one that confirms their side, and really, if you look at the facts holistically, nothing confirms their side, which is why they don't look at them holistically.
Yeah, there's a video I wanted to share, and I just felt like it was a little too controversial, so I did it. Ended up sharing, and I actually deleted it so I wouldn't be tempted to share it. But people are always arguing about who was there first, right? Because then they'll say, "Well, we come from the Canaanites," even though there's literally no proof of it. But or even saying like, "Okay, so maybe Jews and Palestinians, maybe everybody comes from the Canaanites." But it doesn't matter. And this is the hard part to say, because this is a part of, I hate the word colonization because that's not what this is.
No.
But at the end of the day, and this is why I asked you before, like what other countries still have people who were living there at some point still fighting and killing and attacking constantly in order to get their land back, or doing what all this stuff is now. But in there was a war. It was a very big one. And the Jewish people won that war, and they won their land back. However long whoever was there first, none of that matters, because there was a war, and it was brutal and it was horrible, and way too many people died. But the Jewish people won their land. And that's the facts. 1948, the Jewish people won their land, and they have been there ever since. And ever since, there have been so many attacks from the same people who keep saying, well, we want it back, we want it back. And every time they keep on losing, and too many people die in the process every single time. They won. And it's like, I sometimes think about America, and it's like, it's a weird thing, because I think that the indigenous people, the Native Americans, are, at least I'm from Washington State, they're treated really well and have their land. And where I go fishing in Canada, they have like so much respect for the indigenous people. And I look at that and I go, this is how it could be. The way it happened back when everything started in America, it wasn't pretty.
No.
It was awful. But we're here now in a different time with different people, where we can have peace, and we can say, you live here and I live here, and we can live side by side and respect each other. But for some reason in Israel, that's not a possibility, because the side that lost the war continues to brutally kill, murder, maim. I don't know. Can we say all the words grape like everybody says on TikTok?
We can say
all the things. All the things that keep on happening, the constant breaking of ceasefires, all of these things. And then continuing to lose land. Like what's happening to Gaza right now? Oh, Gaza's losing its land again. Israel flag, Israel flag, Israel flag. And I watch and I get chills, and not in a good way, but in just like a backwards way of going, wow, history's repeating itself, in that they attacked and they're losing their land again. And they're going to complain, well, we don't have Gaza. You had Gaza. Israel pulled out. All the people who lived in Gaza, the Jews, pulled out, even though they didn't want to. They pulled out of their homes. It was it 2000? Was it 2005? 2007?
2005.
But it was too. Mm-hmm. And you had it, and yet you are now losing it again.
But they don't care. Well, it's like, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing because on two fronts. On one, I just think that the unfortunate truth is they are bred to hate so much there that it's like a noble thing to fight the fight, even if you're going to lose, because you're going to martyr yourself. And that's a noble thing. And that's so chilling to me that, for instance, the United Nations knows that education exists in schools and doesn't shut them down. We fund that in schools. Yeah. We're funding these people to go get themselves killed. Like if you're wondering why kids are out in the street, Anger Tap, if you follow him, just was talking about this, a video of people of the idea of shooting these kids in Jenin in the West Bank. The kids, I mean, it's an active war zone, right? Mm-hmm. People are told stay home. It's an active war zone. Like this is a combat zone right now. The kids they're like maybe 16 or something like that, or 14.
Oh, minors. Okay. I think there's a big difference between kids and minors, kids, right? Like
I'm using the kids like the Palestinians use the term, not sorry about
it's got to be, there's such a distinction between minor and child, These are minors. They're under 18. They are not children. They are teenagers. They're teenagers. Okay, sorry, go on.
I was using it incorrectly. I'm sorry. So they're running around in all black with cell phones, telling the locations most likely of IDF soldiers. Okay, well, that's going to put IDF soldiers at risk. And then unfortunately, being that they're putting IDF soldiers at risk, they become a legitimate target. I hate that. But what are the parents doing allowing their kids to run around in all black in a combat zone and contribute to the fight? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think some are proud. I do think there are some who do not like it. We know that they are not all the same, and that everyone doesn't feel that way. We do also know that people, like their families, who get money when their kids are martyrs. I mean, we've seen it for so many years. I have a friend actually who was in a bombing on a bus in, I believe it was in 2001. I did an interview with her on my podcast that I used to have a podcast. She was one of the only survivors. And I look back and I go, and that family, the one who did that, his family got money. They got rewarded for what they did.
So Rabbi Pilchowski, who I had on my podcast, for those listening, it's the one last week, I think. His childhood friend was murdered by he lives in a settlement in the West Bank. His childhood friend was murdered by a 16-year-old, stabbed, I think, or maybe it was a suicide bomb, just running to the grocery store for his wife, running an errand.
Wow.
And that they're going to use the term child, but that 16-year-old is now in an Israeli prison for life. He might get released.
Hostage.
Right.
They call him a hostage. Like, what?
His
It's crazy.
will make $1 million. $1 million in payments for rewarding him for what he did, either into a Swiss bank account or some other way. And that's 4 times as much as he would have made if he was a public school teacher from the same government. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like pay for slay. Like the society is set up to work this way. How can you have peace when they reward people for killing people on the other side? It's just never going to happen. And
people refuse to believe it. They refuse to believe that any of this is even true. Everything that we're talking about right now, there are people who might be listening and going, "Oh, they're lying, propaganda." And it's like, but there's so much information out there on the internet about every single thing that we've talked about, except for they don't care. Right. All of that does, like, anyone who's listening who's like, they're lying. There are no lies being said here.
No.
None. Everything we've talked about is easily findable on the internet. And not just from the first page, please. Yeah. If you really care, get past the first page of Google or use one of the other, platforms that isn't so specific. I just find Google is easy, but it's all out there. It's all there.
It's all there. And it's just crazy to me, like, because then people will try and make a moral equivalence between the IDF and the payment terrorist programs. Like, I've seen that. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if they work in the military, yes, they are paid, but they're not paid a bonus if they kill terrorists.
Now, most of the people who work in the IDF on a regular basis are not on the front lines.
Yeah.
The reason that so much that we've been making so many donations and working, having concerts and all the things that we've been doing to raise money for Israel for different organizations, it's because Azaka Search and Rescue went through 4 years worth of supplies in 3 days. Yeah. And Hatzalah went through a year's worth of supply in a week. Because what they're doing and the amount of volunteers and the amount of people that had to come up, right, who were called up into the military, who were just living out all other places in the world, or who were just in school in Israel, or were working at a grocery store or in a hospital in Israel, and they're all gone. My nephew, who's been in Israel for the year, he's been volunteering. He's been cleaning floors in hospitals because there's nobody to do it. There are people picking vegetables because the man who runs the entire farm in the South, he got called up. They ran out of everything. They ran out of socks and they need winter coats. And people think, oh, they can get all that money from the government. The U.S. government is not sending money for winter coats.
No.
That's not where their money is going. But when you have this many people called up and this many people who are hurt and all the different things, they need more supplies. Israel's not America. People forget that the Middle East is so different than America in terms of what they can offer. You can't just be like, okay, let's get from another state. We're going to get, a whole bunch of jackets. Like it's the infrastructure is not like that in Israel. So with the amount of people that need the help, that's why we've come in and we support and we go on missions and we do these things that we do. My parents have been there and literally picked up eggs off of the ground from chickens from this like small little free range. It's a really tight space for these chickens. Not my favorite, but somebody needs to go in and pick the eggs up and then clean the eggs and then clean the chickens. Yeah. Because that's something that normally their workers are doing. And they have a lot of workers that fled home to their, countries or are serving in the IDF, whatever reason, or went to the West Bank because there were many Muslims who were working in Israel as well who fled. They need help in a million different ways, packing sandwiches for soldiers who have gone days sometimes with eating a protein bar. And so people just refuse to think about all that because all they're thinking is this big picture full of one side evil, one side's the villain and one side's the victim. And there's no anything the victim does, they're excused. Yeah. Because of the evil villain.
Well, that's the thing that I think is the most... Okay. That's the thing I think is the most scary in America right now, is that, like, I think someone tweeted this the other day, and I think it sums it up. Like, basically, you have one side that wants peace and will justify any amount of violence in order to get that peace against their oppressor. And
Mm.
I don't know if you want to talk about that as a parent. Like, what is that like teaching your children? Like, you can't hurt people. I feel like that's
Mm.
obvious. My parents did that.
I don't even need to teach it. There's nothing
Yeah.
to teach. It is so obvious. It's so obvious. What I really truly try and teach my kids more is that victim mentality, right? When my kids turn right to blame, I like shut that down.
Mhm.
Forget about blame. It doesn't matter where it started. How does it end? Right? It doesn't matter who started the fight or whatever it may be. Which one? We make mistakes as parents also, but when we're trying to figure out how to fix things, going back to who to blame, it doesn't actually help anyone. So with my kids, that's something that we really focus on a lot, is not turning to blame right away and actually just taking accountability. Take accountability or take responsibility,
Mhm.
right? It's those two things. That's really what we focus on more, and not just being the victim, because that's what blame comes from, right? When you're the victim, it's everything somebody else's fault, and then you don't have to do anything about it because you're the victim. People tell me all the time, my comments, stop playing the victim. I'm like, that's your mentality, not mine. Me talking about anti-Semitism doesn't make me a victim. It makes me someone who is being victimized, right? Like, you are attacking me, but I'm not the victim just because you want me to be one.
Yeah. Well, that's what
That's it.
people call me, like, say I'm making myself a victim too, and it's like, well, I'm not a victim if I talk about, like, that I'm upset that a video I worked hard on got taken down for bullying when I wasn't bullying anyone. Like, I'm not saying
Mhm.
like, I actually think it's kind of funny, the hate messages I get, because half of them are calling me Jewish slurs and I'm not Jewish, and I tell people, "Send me all of those, please," because I would rather me be called them than a Jewish person. So if these people can't get that out of their system and they need to get it out of their system some way, just call them to me because I don't care. But the other ones, they'll call me like the C word or something, and it's just like funny because it's like, you guys are the peacekeepers, and like, you're just like
Mhm.
using like this vile language. I think it's like kind of funny, but like, me talking about that, I'm not saying I'm a victim. I'm kind of calling out, like, you peaceful people are calling me either Jewish slurs because you can't delineate even like why a person would support the state of Israel if they're not Jewish, and like just any hateful language. I don't use
Yeah.
hateful language against Palestinians or Muslims or anything like that. So, and I can vehemently disagree with like Islamism and political Islam, and I know what that's like. I live in a heavily Muslim area. I grew up in one. I have Muslim friends. I don't need to call them hateful language to say like the things I disagree with, but the other side
Yeah.
in this can't, I guess. So,
No, they can't. There's the hypocrisy is real. I actually just shared recently a video from this amazing Israeli Black woman
mhm,
who was born Jewish. She's not a convert. Her mother was born Jewish. I think she was from Ethiopia.
mhm,
And she was saying, like, people are so angry at her because, how could she as a Black woman support Israel? And she's like, but I'm Israeli. Like,
mhm.
I think she was actually born in Israel. She's like, the color of your skin should never be the decision maker in how you feel. The same thing with religion. It should never be that if you are a certain religion, you have to feel a certain way. But I see this a lot, that the same people who are obsessed with peace and love and support everyone and let everyone into your circles and all the diversity are the same people who will tell you how you have to feel because of your diversity.
Yep. Yep.
Because you're Jewish, you have to feel a certain way. Because you're Black, you have to be a certain way. And she's like, but here I am, Black Ethiopian, born Jew, Zionist, and you're telling me that I'm not allowed to because of the color of my skin? It's like people who say that anyone who supports Israel is a white supremacist. Like, this obsession with skin color. And sure, people will go, well, that's your privilege. You can say that because you're white. So I'm white today. I'm Jewish today. Like,
Well,
make up your minds. Because the Jewish people tend to be whatever they need to be in order to be hated. So like, that's how they choose what
mhm,
we are today, right? In the 40s, we were a race. We are not actually a race. We are an ethno religion, but like, that's what it needed to be in order. That's when, Hitler was measuring noses, and they were experimenting on Jewish bodies to prove race and all these different things. I mean, I saw that at Yad Vashem in Israel in the Holocaust Museum. Like, oh my God, it makes your heart, like, makes you sick. But
yeah.
it's this obsession with everyone has to feel a certain way, I think, that causes so much divide. which is very much an American thing, unfortunately. And people kind of just take that and make that a worldly thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, my last question is kind of getting into one of my most interesting videos that you made recently that I really liked and I want to talk about is you were talking about you were putting up a mezuzah in your closet, I think, and then there were Christians on there saying like, "Oh, I put one up in solidarity." And I think that's really weird as a Christian to do that. And I think can you talk a little bit about one of the things I feel weird in my videos is I don't want to ever sound like I'm like I hate this word, but like fetishizing Judaism. Like I think a lot of like especially evangelicals do that now, not out of a bad place, but like it was Jesus's religion, so they want to participate in like maybe a Seder too. But I think that there's kind of a line there of like if you're invited by a Jewish person, I think it's obviously you can go, but I think like doing that not in the presence of Jewish people is I'm not saying like banning, outlawing, anything like that. I just think like from a cultural practice, like that feels weird to me. Can you talk a little bit about that, like as a Jewish person?
Yeah,
You feel
it's an interesting one because I know some people who feel like it's totally fine and other people who are completely offended by it.
Mhm.
I put myself somewhere in the middle. I'm
Mhm.
not going to your home and ripping down your mezuzah if you're not Jewish. I'm not knocking on your door if I see you lighting a menorah and saying you shouldn't be doing that. If people are asking me as a public figure for my opinion, I think there's so many amazing ways to stand in solidarity with the Jewish people without doing our good deeds and our mitzvos and like the things that we're commanded to do as Jews,
Mhm.
especially when you're of another religion that actually rejects all of the
Yeah.
things that we're commanded to do as Jews, right? Like if you're a Christian, Jesus died for your sins. You don't need to be doing all the things that we believe we need to be doing that are part of the Torah. Like that's where the big separation is. So I always get a little confused when someone standing in solidarity will take on something that's from the Torah as a commandment that they don't need to be doing, and they do it because they're standing with us. Mind you, I appreciate
Mhm.
that they're standing with us, which is why I'm not like knocking on doors, go and take down that mezuzah. Or if somebody sends me a message, right, and shows me, I say, that is beautiful. I've had private messages from people who will, like somebody sent me, I loved it. It was a Christmas tree, like with blue and white. It was beautiful. And she was Catholic. And I was like, that's I shared it. I loved it. Like be inspired to, that's a really cool way to stand up because blue and white, it's colors, right? You
Yeah.
want to put stars and dreidels on your tree. I don't care in the sense that like, I love that you're standing with us. I think it's a little weird to light a menorah or hang a mezuzah because of what it's for and its
Mhm.
purpose. I can't even imagine like if a non-Jewish person had a wedding and took on Jewish traditions like a chuppah and breaking the glass in order to stand in solidarity with us. Like I just and that's
Yeah.
the same equivalence. A mezuzah is a Jewish thing with a Jewish purpose and it's specific for us. I just think there's so many other ways
They do
to
it.
go about it. That's my feeling on it. But I also am grateful and appreciative for those people at the same time, which is why it's all very mixed and confusing. Where I know some people who will like die on that hill that you cannot do any of these things and you cannot wear a Star of David. And I'm like, listen, they're standing with us. Like, let's chill and just know that as long as they're not trying to convert me, because there's that trauma, right? There's thousands of years of that.
Yeah.
As long as they're not trying to convert me or kill me because I won't convert to their religion, let's stand side by side.
Speaking of the converting thing, so did you follow like the Candace Owens Ben Shapiro drama a few weeks ago?
No, I actually on purpose did not
Yeah.
because it was so like I think it's only drama if you make it drama, and like I just didn't need that extra drama in my life from other people's stuff. I think that I've heard things from Candace that I think are amazing. I don't always agree with her. Same thing with Ben. I've met him quite a few times. I was on a cruise with him actually not so
Oh.
long ago. And I was on pace-off programs with him. Like he's a good man. Not everybody likes everything he says. I don't like everything he says, but I still agree with him a lot. And same with her.
Yeah.
It's hard because you see people who don't support you or can do anti-Semitic things, and it's very confusing. So I just kind of
Okay.
took
Then
a
I
step
won't
back from
ask
that
you.
drama.
I
Yeah.
won't ask you about that. Part of me wonders if like people do like Christians do the like participate in Jewish traditions because a lot of Christianity, like Christian Christmas traditions have been kind of secularized. Like there are people who don't practice. There are even Jews that put up Christmas trees,
Yeah.
at this point. And I'm not offended by that.
Mhm.
So I think maybe they see it as like, oh, we can secularize this Jewish tradition, which is, I still think it's a little.
It's very possible, by the way, and that's something that like you always have to be careful of. There are people who don't like that Target and Walmart and all these places sell Hanukkah decorations because they don't because the Hanukkah decorations aren't really a thing. Like they weren't a thing and they became a thing because of Christmas. The same way that the Hanukkah presents became a thing in the night because of in the 20th century because of Christmas.
Mhm.
So there's that not wanting things to be so secularized because it loses a sense of that importance in the religion, but then at the same time, it's connecting Jewish people to the religion who otherwise are not connected. There's that spirituality. It's so back and forth. Like some people feel one way or another. I love going to Marshalls and seeing Jewish representation.
Mhm.
I personally love it. So like I'm on that side of things
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Well, that's my last question for you, I think, because that's kind of, I find that part of the debate fascinating. And I feel like on TikTok, it's all just like free Palestine, so I can't ask those questions. But thank you for answering that because I'm.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And it's nice to talk about things other than all of this craziness too, right? Like it's that's why I still share and I'm sharing with Hanukkah and all the different, Jewish traditions. Like I want to make sure that even when I talk about Israel every day. And I did before this war, like people are like, get back to your regular. I'm like, I'm an Orthodox Jewish content creator
Right.
who is also a Zionist and has been to Israel 3 times this year. Like, and hopefully going one more time before the end of the year, like all officially happen. I'll tell you more about that if it does. But this is my content. This is my life. So but I also want to make sure that I'm still sharing my food and my grocery shopping and that, because that's still happening no matter what else is happening in the world. Like people offended that I'm eating. Well, people there can't eat. I'm like, okay, wrap that one up, please. Because like, if you're going to starve yourself, go for it. I'm going to make sure that I'm still being a light into the world and still bringing positivity into the world because we need that right now. So that's what I'm focusing on at the same time that I'm really making sure every day to bring up Israel and make sure that it's always, because it's a constant in my life.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Please, everyone follow. I'm sure you all already do follow Melinda. So
You never know.
yeah, but please go follow her. I know you have a book coming out. Is there anything else you want to promote?
So really it's, the real Melinda Strauss is where I'm at everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the main thing. Instagram and TikTok are like my babies. So those are the 2 places that's most important. I do have a cookbook coming out, but not until 2025.
Oh, okay.
So what you want to do, hopefully it's going to be called Eat Jewish. You never know when cookbook names change along the way. I just announced right when it happened because I'm the kind of person who literally, when I was having babies, announced them as soon as I could. So like I can't keep things to myself, but follow me on social media because then any updates about my life, anything with my book, that's all going to be there. The real Melinda Strauss.
Well, thank you so much.